If it seems like I'm talking to you in the front a lot, it's because my notes are right in front of you. So, let's see. So I design immersive theme park, museum, and other location-based entertainment experiences. That's my confession this morning, I guess. In 2008, we were brought into a project that had been in design and development for over 4 years at that point. The project was for the National World War II Museum in New Orleans, and Tom Hanks was the executive producer. The museum was setting out to create an hour-long, multi-sensory cinematic experience, exploring how World War II pushed humans beyond all reasonable boundaries. And this was all to be in this brand new 4D theater with a massive screen, dimensional projections, and multi-sensory effects. When we were brought in, the project had been through countless script and design iterations over those 4 years. So our job was to bring an outside perspective and ultimately pull it all together to create an impactful experience. So how did we start? We began by asking a lot of questions and challenging all the existing notions, all the perceived limitations, and even the very outline of the script as it had been developed. We struggled a lot with the tone, the structure, and the meaning of the show. Is this a history lesson? Is this a documentary? Is this a big spectacle on stage? What's it really about, and what do people feel? Actually, the museum wanted the audience to stand at the end of this and sing "God Bless America" together. But we wanted the audience to leave in a contemplative silence, kind of overwhelmed and hungry to learn more at the rest of the museum. So we realized we couldn't design this experience until we answered a key question and until the museum wholeheartedly agreed upon the answer to that question. What is the audience thinking, feeling, saying, and doing as they exit the experience? So where do you begin your design process? What's the first thing you do? Is it spaghetti to the wall, or do you have a clearly defined outcome? Do you focus on a list of tasks, or do you focus on the outcome you're trying to achieve with your design? My challenge to you is for you to have clear goals for how your audience is going to interact with your experience, but also how they're going to feel about it. What is the audience thinking, feeling, saying, and doing as they exit the experience? This has become the cornerstone of Mousetrappe's design and creative philosophy, a process we call start at the end. We begin every project with that key question, and we return to the answer to that question time and time again as a litmus test for every single design element that we do. So today, I'd like to share more about what we do as Mousetrappe. I want to talk a little bit about our creative and design philosophies and a few of our strategies that we use in the creative process. So I created Mousetrappe in 2005 to pursue theme park, museum, cultural, and other immersive media experiences. I'd worked for the Disney parks previously for about 10 years, and I saw an opportunity to use the desktop-driven visual effects and animation in a workflow that allows us to maximize creative and technical aspects of a production. And while we've delivered more than 80 projects in the last 10 years, here's about 7 of them that kind of represent what we do. Beyond All the Boundaries, which I talked about at the World War II Museum. Big giant screen, 30 feet tall, 130 feet wide. Audience size is smaller than this room. So it's a overwhelming piece of scale. Space Shuttle Atlantis at Kennedy Space Center. When the orbiters were retired, the 4 existing orbiters, including the Enterprise test orbiter, were sent to 4 different locations around the country. Kennedy Space Center in Florida and Cape Canaveral received Space Shuttle Atlantis. It was our job to create an entire show experience leading up to the reveal of the space shuttle. An amazing project to be a part of was the rebuilding of the World Trade Center. So we were part of the One World Observatory, where we created a 6-minute looping art piece that features 50 of the construction workers, pipe fitters, elevator builders, architects, everybody, security people, everybody involved in creating the World Trade Center and setting a framework that talks about the vision for the future for that building. Recently, about a year ago, we opened 2 attractions at PortAventura World, which is about an hour south of Barcelona in Spain. They built a Ferrari land in their theme park, and we did two attractions. One was a flying theater similar to Soarin' Over the Horizons, and a racing ride that was in an Omnidome, as well as 11 immersive media experiences in the queue. So we do rides and attractions also. A great project I got to do about 2 years ago. I was a creative director for Disney. We do a lot of work with Disney. We do a lot of projection mapping on their icons around the world. They brought us in about 4 years ago to create a nighttime experience as Disney's Animal Kingdom at Walt Disney World added nighttime operations. And so we created a projection map experience on the Tree of Life. Not so much a show, but a kind of an ongoing, evolving, wants to feel like a sort of natural occurrence. Another fun one we got to do is Star Wars: A Galactic Spectacular. Lots of Star Wars at Disney. Too much, it seems like. Star Wars: A Galactic Spectacular is a 12-minute big spectacle at Disney Hollywood Studios. The icon at Disney Hollywood Studios is a replica of the Chinese theater. So we projection map the Chinese theater and buildings to the left and right of the Chinese theater. It's a 13,000 pixel wide canvas, and from that, we recreated 39 iconic scenes from all of the films, and we were privileged to get to do all the visual effects in-house for that under the supervision of Industrial Light and Magic, which was, I think we're one of the few companies on the outside doing Star Wars content for Disney, besides ILM. And a big iconic one for us last year, I was also creative director, external creative director for a show called Happily Ever After, which is the nighttime fireworks spectacular at the Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World. It replaced a show called Wishes, which had run for 13 and a half years. Previously, it was the top-rated show at Walt Disney World, but that show was showing signs of age, and it was time to do something new, so we added all kinds of new elements to the show and created a whole new story arc. So here's a 2-minute look at some of our work. Thank you. Thanks. We really are lucky to get to work on the things that we do. And so now I'd like to share some of our core design philosophies. In preparing this presentation, I actually realized there's more similarities between what all of you do and what we do than I thought. I think we tend to work in the physical world in theme parks and silly places like that, museums, and maybe a little less in the virtual world, but we all have an audience. We all have people who experience the work that we do, and I think there's a lot of parallels, or I hope you'll find parallels at least between the types of ways that we approach the design and the creation of these experiences, and I hope that you'll take away a little bit about our concept of the emotional aspect of design. So here's a big one for us in our industry. For 20 years now, I'll walk into meeting after meeting, and people will say, you know what, it's all about story. We got to do story. We got to do story. I think Jesse and Elaine shared that's been hitting a lot of you recently, looking for story in everything that we do. I don't actually believe that it's quote unquote all about story. For me, what it's all about is the emotional connection with the audience. So the story is a great tool. It's a wonderful tool. It's our go-to. It's a terrific tool, but it is only a means to an end. The end that you want to have is the emotional connection with the audience. If story is the right way to get there, then great. An example I use within our industry a lot is if you've seen a Cirque du Soleil show and enjoyed that show, Cirque du Soleil, in my opinion, are not the greatest storytellers. Sure, they have backstories. Sure, there is a concept and an arc and their minds to it. But the more that they try to do story, kind of the more it takes you out of what it is they're doing. What they're great at is human drama, human character, emotion, spectacle, color, size, scale, pace, music, all of those types of things. So we have a broad set of tools, and story isn't the only tool to get there. So what we're trying to do then is use all of our tools to reinforce an emotion, that feeling you want the audience to experience at each moment. So for every show at Mousetrappe, when we start with that question about where we want the audience at the end of an experience, we kind of work backwards from there. That's what the start of the end concept means. We work back and we realize that with Space Shuttle Atlantis, our job was to reveal the orbiter. So we have a large screen surrounded by dome-like arches. And at the end of the show, the screen in front of you raises up, and you are about 20 to 25 feet from the nose of the orbiter. And so it was very clear what the outcome of that show was to us. It was to put the audience in a peak state of anticipation so that first look of the orbiter face-to-face would be the most emotionally connective moment in their experience that day. So you work backwards from there, and so what we end up doing is we create this roadmap, this sort of emotional arc, and we attach very specific emotions to each and every scene that we do. Anticipation, bravado, anxiety, curiosity, all those types of words. And then from that roadmap, you have something to judge your work. You have something to look at every single design element that we do to make sure that it supports that particular emotion and that arc is going to take us to the place that we want to be at the end of the experience. Another thing for us in our theme park industry. So it would seem like Mickey Mouse and Luke Skywalker or the Space Shuttle are the central characters in the shows that we do, but in our world, the central characters are actually the audiences themselves. It's the visitors, it's the people who are coming to experience this. So what that means is that we use our technologies and our stories and all the tools that we have to surround them and to focus them and to make them tell their own stories. So my question to you is, who are your central characters in your stories or in your projects? And since our visitors are creating their own stories, we're just guiding them. And we're giving them ingredients to build their own interactions and memories. How can you guide your audience to create their own interactions and their own stories? When you think of one of your great experiences that you've had, a movie, a theme park attraction, a conference that you've been to, there are usually 1, 2, 3, at the most 4 or 5 sort of key individual images that immediately pop to mind. You'll say, it's that show it's that movie with the, and then you start to fill in the details after that. So as we design, we look for these sort of tent poles, these key moments, these marks along the way, and make sure that there's something very distinctive, very iconic, very memorable about the show that people can take away. They may not, with Happily Ever After, our fireworks show, they may not remember each and every scene or each and every song that was in there, but I can guarantee you every audience member has at least 1 or 2 or 3 things they can say. Is that show where Quasimodo comes out and sings on Notre Dame on the castle? Or I don't need to give another example, sorry. Just took myself down a bad road there. So we look for those 3 to 5 key scenes, those tent poles that we can hang things on. You've probably been here before. Sometimes you start with this grand vision, this grand design, right? And little by little, the budgets, the marketing, all those other factors come in, and you start to value engineer, right? And you take this big vision, this big holistic thing you have, and you start whittling away at it. You start chopping off the pieces on it. So I had a boss at Disney in the 90s when I worked there who at the end of every meeting, we would walk out of entertainment, we would go present these things, and his last word of advice was always, don't get middled. So what middled means is getting stuck in this place where Once you get whittled down beyond a certain point, this value engineer, this sort of three-quarters vision of something greater may not be the right solution anymore. And so it was his challenge to us to take a stand and say, at this point where you've chopped too much off that the original holistic vision is no longer complete, to stop there and go back and say, let's design to the new parameters. Let's make this a great experience within the new box that we have. And third section here is just some of our strategies for the design process, some of the things that we do to get ideation and creativity going. Our industry uses the word charrette. Charrette is a group design process. It's a big meeting. It's usually either half day, full day. Sometimes I've been to charrettes that are as long as 3 to 4 days long, depending on the scale of the project. A lot of people get in the room together. A lot of ideas are thrown out. So it's a group creative process, and we do a lot of group thinking. And that speaks back to, some of this is going to speak back to the D word that Jesse already introduced today, the diversity aspect. So in the charrette, there are 3 rules. These rules were usually introduced to the group at the beginning of the charrette just to sort of remind everybody. And you've probably heard some of these things before, but there's this concept of no bad ideas. So what you're trying to do is you're actually trying to create a quantity, not quality of ideas. You're trying to get everything out on the table, trying to get as many ideas and as much creative juices flowing. And so you don't want people inhibited by a lack of confidence in an idea. You want people to just throw the idea out there and for there not to be judgment on that idea. There's sometimes laughs, but the idea here is to take every idea, good or bad, and to build on those ideas. And so by taking the inhibitions away about whether, while I prejudge my own idea before I speak it into the room, I may be eliminating the possibility of throwing an idea or a concept or a notion that somebody else can build upon and find an additional solution. When I'm preparing for a charrette, probably the 2 most important things I do, number 1 is back to this diversity concept. If you're familiar with this book, The Medici Effect, the author proposes within this book that the true impetus for the Renaissance was the Medici family and how they brought, for the first time together, kind of forced artists and scientists and physicians and architects to work together. And it was that diversity and that collaboration and that sharing of ideas and that cross-pollinating that created this explosion of innovation. So when we're designing a charrette, and we design our charrettes, there's a lot of preparation that goes into these. I spend a lot of time thinking about exactly who we want to have in the room. We want people with diverse backgrounds, with diverse points of view, but they also do have to have a common understanding and passion for the project's outcome. So while in that ideation process, here's 4 big tools that we use. So immersion. We're big believers in immersion. It's our core product. It's the thing that we deliver, is immersive environments. We do a ton of research. We do a ton of thinking ahead of time. We fill our creative room with images and music and sound effects and videos, and we just have a huge playlist of YouTube and Vimeo inspiration. This is all inspiration. You want to be completely immersed in the subject so that you feel as much as you can like you're there and already in the subject matter. But a big one for me is we tend to focus on answers a lot, right? But we also have discovered that the more you focus on the answers rather than the questions, you tend to head down the wrong track. You're trying to find solutions. So we've kind of discovered that the quality of our answers comes from the quality of our questions. So the other thing that we're doing in preparation for a charrette, and what I'm doing as I lead a charrette the whole time, is I'm asking questions. I'm asking myself questions like, what can I say or what can I ask next that will help guide this and propel this forward? What do I need to do to shake up the room and get some new ideas flowing? How do you get the juices flowing? And then you ask questions about the project. There's a reason we ask ourselves rhetorical questions, right? Because 9 times out of 10, your brain finds those answers and those solutions. So I think the key part of the creative process for us is to really ask those questions and to think about what those questions are and focus on the quality of those questions. When we're in this process, sometimes you get hung up on the latest toys and tricks and technologies and things that are kind of, hot things in the industry, but we have to always come back to the experience. And so sometimes we'll find ourselves off track because we get fixated on these kind of, toys and tricks along the way, but they have to serve the experience. They have to be in service of the experience. So coming back to the experience, refocusing the group, refocusing the creative on again, those emotional beats, on what the audience is feeling, where you want them to be, then deciding which tools are the best ones to get you there. And then ultimately, back to the start at the end, when we get stuck, when we just don't know what to do, we go back to that original question of what is the audience thinking, feeling, saying, and doing when they exit the experience. It usually refocuses the group thinking and gets you back to the core mission, back to the core outcome. And then one last concept. A good friend and colleague of mine used this word once in a charrette. I don't think he even remembers doing it. But he said, kind of when you get stuck in the creative process, I have one colleague I work with who usually mid-afternoon you hit sort of that post-lunch lull and the ideas have stopped flowing. You say, okay, now let's do all the bad ideas. And so you get in this great process of being up on the whiteboard or on the sheets on the wall, and you're just writing. Everyone's throwing out the silliest, dumbest ideas for the attraction or the show. And it generates an energy, and yet I have probably 20% of the time a great idea has ended up coming out of that deliberate exercise of trying to find a bad idea. My version of that is heretical questions. It's challenging the notions and the assumptions that you have. It's amazing how many times we'll get well into a creative process and realize that we're doing things a certain way just because that's how it's been done or because nobody questioned it. And so we'll step back and say, well, what if? What are the notions that we could challenge here? It's not about destroying the client's concept or just being different for different sake. It's about stepping back and saying, are we just doing this because that's what we've always done? We want to continually find these new perspectives in what we do. So quick summary for you. Key points for me, I think as a takeaway here is that it's really critical for us to guide our audiences through their emotional connections, right? So guide your audience through emotional connections. Have a strategy, have a plan, have a strategy, a design, a process, and your philosophies, right? And ultimately be outcome-oriented rather than task-oriented. So Beyond All Boundaries do leave in contemplative silence, and it's amazing to stand outside the theater and watch the people exit with their lives and their perspectives change. And I would challenge all of you to look for ways to bring your audience to that point where at the end of the interaction, they really have something to grasp. So thank you.